Chief.
Sir.
Nice to see you.
You too.
I've had the pleasure of working with Chief Martin for over 20 years, and I think we're very lucky as a committee to have you here before us because, once again, someone who is extremely qualified and has a wealth of knowledge under your belt. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just talk about, you talked a little bit about back in our day. I think we're the same age.
Yes.
And I think things are different, and I think we witnessed the transformation where kids went from having a fight with their fists to having a fight with guns.
Yes.
I think that I can pinpoint that back into the early 90s, I think, when things started changing. Fist fight, no one brought their fist to a fight, they always brought a gun.
Yeah.
Which, I think in part of what we've experienced in this whole debate about school security is people of our generation and older people wrapping their heads around the fact that this is not the same world that we grew up in, and that the dangers are different, the mentality is different for whatever reason, but it's a more dangerous place, and our world's a more dangerous place, I think. Would you agree with that?
I do.
Okay. I want to talk to you and follow up a little bit about my comments to District Attorney Freed regarding involuntary commitment. I want to ask you, and I know you're a chief who doesn't sit in the office all day. I know you're somebody who's out and about. Do you have experience where you can talk to us about where you have seen people who you think should be committed but do not meet the criteria to be committed involuntarily? Has it ever run through your mind in these situations that that's a school shooter right there?
Absolutely, and all too frequent basis. It's an issue that certainly this body needs to address, and I have a recent one that I can share with you that's probably going to stun you. About 6 weeks ago, we had a situation with a high school student who's had some history, mental health history, acted out very violently with his mother. We were called to the home. It then turned into a knockdown, drag-out fight with 3 of my officers. When I was briefed in the morning, the sergeant said, "Chief, just to let you know, there was a lot of blood involved. Some of it was, he had broken his nose actually before we got into the fight." It took 3 officers to subdue this young man, and God bless my officers, their first inclination was to file a 302 involuntary commitment on him. They took him down to Harrisburg Hospital, and the crisis worker refused to sign him in. There was some pressure placed, so they ended up releasing this young man. Well, what happens when that happens? Throws it right back to law enforcement. We then had to charge him criminally because there's got to be some type of accountability. What's happened over the years is law enforcement, and I know DA Freed spoke to it very well, it's been thrown into our laps because the mental health community is really not ending up to their job, and we have no alternative. It's been put upon us, and it's unfair. This young man should have been committed that morning, and we would have went back and handled it as a mental health commitment. Now he's been charged, assault on a police officer, and the ramifications of that were a protected class. And I ended up stepping in a little bit for the family and with DA Marsico to help them out as best I could. But I can't help but to think that this young man was let down by the mental health community. So that's happening all the time. And Representative Regan, in another hat that I wear, I'm the commander of the Dauphin County Crisis Response Team. It's the SWAT team under District Attorney Marsico. All too often we're having these barricaded situations with mental health folks, and they're very, very tough situations.
Thank you for your response. I do have a follow-on, and it's a little different. We discussed with many of our testifiers today about their opinions as experts about arming teachers or school staff. Could you give us your opinion on that?
I don't think in any respect, and like I said, my son's a middle school teacher, that teachers or school staff should be armed. It's not their profession. If I could just kind of expand for 30 seconds.
Certainly.
When you talk about arming somebody and potentially having to use deadly force, I just want you to think about something. I've been involved in 2 bad shooting incidents in the past 4 months with the SWAT team. In one incident, there was over 100 rounds exchanged. We were in a shootout in the Hall Manor public housing complex, and a month later, we were in a hostage situation where there was rounds exchanged. You've got to be prepared for that. You've got to be trained for that. Not just anybody can do that. Those of us in my profession, those types of incidents are traumatic, they're damaging. If we weren't police officers having the training and the experience we have, we would be floored by those types of incidents. To put a teacher or an administrator in that kind of situation is wholly unfair. Wholly unfair. Hope that answers.
It does, and thank you. And just one more, if I can ask the chairman for his indulgence, just one more question. You talked about officers in the school, but you also mentioned that 30 seconds is a long time when someone's pulling the trigger.
Yes.
So I guess in some of our schools, the possibility is that, you can actually have an officer in the school, an armed officer in the school, but he is in a part of the school where he can't even get to where the shooter is for a matter of minutes. So that was one of the thoughts I had behind a choke point or a pinch point a theory where there's an officer who's screening visitors as they come in. I think the experienced officer looking at somebody, like maybe the father with the cell phone issue, obviously would have been able to see that this person was irate and maybe use their law enforcement experience to read the situation.
Sure.
And maybe detain before that person got into the school. Although I realize the value of a mentor in the school, of a police officer, but I also think that, with the exception of Columbine, many of the school shootings have taken place throughout time are someone who doesn't belong in the school. And if you'd apply a choke point, pinch point, security screening point at the choke point, there's no foolproof system. But I think I'm wondering what your opinion is about that, and would that be a way to keep some evildoer, from even entering the school? And I know from my experience in the Marshal Service and federal buildings around the country that when there's an armed intruder, the altercation takes place overwhelmingly in the pinch point, and overwhelmingly the bad guy dies in the pinch point. Just your opinion on that, please.
Well, when you were talking to me, I was in the military, and I was actually in the security forces, and sometimes some of my duty was gate guard, at the front gate or rear gate, and armed. It served its purpose. Military bases are protected enclaves, and the mere presence of the armed gate guards, I think if you go back through history, there's been very, very, very few problems at military bases with armed gate guards. They serve that frontline deterrence. And I guess the other thing I would say in support of that is this: cops are expensive. They just flat out are, and I don't mean it in any derogatory way. I am one, but what I'm trying to say is there's only so many of us to go around. When I speak of our park and walks, they're 20-minute, interludes is what they are, because those officers are working a patrol beat. They've got other responsibilities. I certainly don't even have enough officers to add a school resource officer. I don't have it. And, fighting for more funding is always tough, as you know. So I think there's a lot of value in it, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it.
Sir.